Greetings, guys. How's it going? Taking some time here down at the marina to hang back, just chill out and talk a little bit about what I learned during this recent build, building Smoke Racer. It was such an experience that I will definitely not forget because it was my second build. And instead of building a cruiser, which I did with the first one around, I built a cafe racer style bike. And there was so many different challenges that I knew that I would face, and then things that I did not know that I would run into. So let's talk a little bit about that. Welcome to the Cruiser Racer channel. I'm Rebel Lion of the Electron Rebels, and this is my creative space. I call it the Builder's Corner. The Builder's Corner is the home for electric bike enthusiasts. And in this space, we're always on the hunt for the perfect canvas. A canvas for me is a bike frame. Nothing excites me more than turning something old into something new. So if this appeals to you and you like what we like too, then subscribe to this channel. Here in the Builder's Corner, you'll learn about bike mechanics and DIY custom e-bike builds. Now, let's get to the show. So, I bought the bike about 3 months ago now. It was back in April, early April, after romancing Swan Creek. It was Friday cruising, romancing Swan Creek. I was most inspired to get a mountain bike because at the time I was visiting many mountain bike trails and off-road trails, and seeing all the fun that many of the riders were having out there on the trails just man, it got me salivating about getting a mountain bike because I really wanted to experience what they were experiencing. So the day that I recorded Romancing Swan Creek for Friday Cruising, I went to the bike shop looking to change over the crank, the bottom bracket for Ghost Cruiser. Ghost Cruiser, of course, is a kit. I bought a kit for Ghost Cruiser, and it came with a pedal assist system, which I could not use because Ghost Cruiser was a one-piece crankset, and it wasn't gonna work. I could not get the pedal assist sensor, let alone the ring, on there for it to work properly. So I had to change out the bottom bracket and the crank set, and which I did. I found that, and while I was there looking for those things, the parts, I went looking through the bike aisle and found a few things that they had on hand. The bike shop that I volunteer at is the one that I found Smoke Racer. So I bought Smoke Racer as is, or no, it wasn't as is. The bike shop did work on it and repaired or got it rolling properly for sale. And I bought Smoke Racer as a rock hopper mountain bike, pretty good bike, for about $150 used. What I really liked about the bike was, one, I liked the tires. The tires seemed like they were in good shape, had a lot of life to them. Things I would definitely climb some rocks and some little dunes and give me a good run for my money on the trail. And I also liked it because of the size. The frame size was perfect for me. It wasn't too big or too small. It's perfect size for me. I'm not a very tall person at all. So the frame fit. It worked out. And There were some things that I was not happy with the bike. For example, I didn't like the stem that was on it. It was made for, the stem was more of those ones that you'd have to lean forward on to ride, and it extended out a little bit towards the tire, and it didn't work out for me. I can't stand those type of stems where you have to lean forward on the bike because it's very uncomfortable. So the stem was something that I knew was going to have to go. And then the handlebars, they were straight handlebars, and just didn't feel right riding. So I knew automatically that I was going to be changing the steering column, the entire steering column on the bike. And that was something I knew going in. And so I took the opportunity, checked it out, rode it while I was at the shop, saw what I would need to change in order to make it a nice racer, and I bought it. And I was excited, still excited. The bike definitely served its purpose. I got a chance to get out on some trails and experience mountain biking, something that I had never done before. So that's the story behind the bike. So when I got the bike home, I started really tearing it apart and getting familiar with the frame and what I was working with. The first thing I needed to do was put the wheel on the motor, or the hub motor wheel on the bike, to make sure that it was a fit. And it was. I wouldn't say it was an absolute perfect fit. It's one thing when you're dealing with a rear hub motor, you got to make sure the wheel is going to fit between the two chainstays to make sure that it's going to be a good fit for the bike. And that was the first thing I did, was make sure the wheel was going to fit, and it did. Next, I needed to put on all the parts for the motor. And upon placing the handles on, I realized that the brake system that originally came with the bike wasn't going to work. I was having a hard time. The original brakes were cantilever brakes, and I was having a very hard time getting those brakes to tighten properly. The system clearly did not work with the brakes, the brake handles or the brake levers that come with the kit. And it's because I found out later that it was because cantilever brake levers are a specific type, and you can't just match, say, a drum brake lever or a caliper, a V-brake lever, or even a caliber lever with a cantilever brake system. So that was the first thing that had to go. I struggled with trying to make it work for, I want to say, 3 days, and I just couldn't make it happen. So after taking it up to the bike shop to get some more information about what I was working with, that's when it dawned on me that these brakes aren't going to work. So I was going to originally replace those brakes with caliper rim brakes, and found V-brakes instead. So this is my first time working with V-brakes, and I gotta say I'm very happy with the V-brakes. They're easy to release when you need to do work on the bike or remove the tire, and I think they work a little better than caliper rim brakes, in my opinion. What I really wanted to do was put disc brakes on the bike, and it would have worked with the fork that I bought, or that I switched up for the steering column, but I would have only been able to use a disc brake on the front wheel and not the rear. because the bike frame was clearly designed for cantilevers. So the idea was I was gonna go ahead and I knew I was gonna change the fork on the bike because I wanted something with some suspension, a shock absorber with suspension. And after working with Robbie, the lead instructor in the bike shop, well, one of the lead instructors in the bike shop, I got a better idea on disc brakes versus, V brakes or rim brakes, and realized that I didn't want to go that way. Disc brakes can be messy and be a little complicating, and you'd have to change them more often. That's not something that I really wanted to deal with. So I'm very happy with the V brakes. They worked out. That was the first challenge that I ran into, was brake systems. The second challenge wasn't necessarily a build challenge, but then it kind of was. So I originally wanted to get a triangle battery for the bike. Because it's a triangle frame, I figured the triangle battery would definitely work the best, be the best fit for the build. But after doing so much research on the triangle batteries that are out on the market, I found that it wasn't going to be the best fit. One thing about the down tube batteries is that the mount for it is made to be locked. So the battery is made to be locked to the mount so that it doesn't move, of course, when you're riding. It's secure, and no one can just walk off with it. And that's something that I found with the triangle battery, was that there was really, the only way to mount it was through straps. They got a strap system on the casing that keeps it in place, but there isn't any way to make sure it stays secured to the bike. I didn't want to think about unmounting the battery every time I walked away from the bike, because the batteries can be very heavy. The battery that I have on the bike already is just under 10 pounds, and the triangle batteries, I believe, are about 12 pounds, and that's not something that I wanted to be carrying around every time I walked away from the bike. So I decided not to go with the triangle battery, even though I still feel that it would have been the best fit for the bike. There's just not a lot of security in locking it down to the bike, so that one, it doesn't move around too much, and two, so that no one can just walk away with the battery. So I went on and used the same battery, the same type of battery that I use for Ghost Cruiser. And before I even bought the actual battery for it, I was able to buy just a battery mount and use the one battery that I had already for my first build. So that was like one positive for the down tube battery, is that if you're buying the same, and the thing is, you can find these mounts by themselves. You don't necessarily have to buy the whole battery in order to have the mount. You can buy replacement mounts online. So I was able to buy a replacement mount for about $30 and use that until I was able to get a battery just for Smoke Racer, and that was definitely a positive. And then the third obstacle wasn't too much of a challenge, more like an obstacle that I ran into, was the fork situation. So I wanted to change the fork, change the original fork for Smoke Racer, because it was just a fork. You know, I wanted some cushion underneath the tire, or to help the tire whenever you went over bumps or when climbing a hill or a rock, you know. And the original fork had no suspension. It was just a fork. Not to mention, it was 4 cantilevers, right? So that was definitely another one of the things that I needed to do with the brake, with the fork, was get something that, because like I said, I wanted to put drum brakes on the front, which like I would have been able to do with a different fork. And I did find a fork. I found a RockShox fork for disc brakes. But once again, I decided not to go with the disc brakes. However, the fork is great. This RockShox fork is awesome. And one thing I did not take into account for changing over the fork on a bike is that you're gonna need special tools. I mean, seems like with the bike, there's always special tools that you just don't have unless you're a bike mechanic. And there's definitely something that has grown. Tools. My tool collection has grown a bit because of this one build. Now, originally I was gonna buy the tool to change over the forks, but I felt that it was going to be more expensive than what I wanted to spend, because I really thought that this was going to be the one time that I would change the fork over on a bike, and I was wrong. I'm going to end up purchasing the tools that are needed to change out a fork, because it's more than just taking off. There's more to it than just taking off the original and then placing another one on. You actually have to take off the cups on the fork mount. You have to change the cups for whichever fork you're going to use, the headset and all that. You have to change all these things in order to make the one that you want fit properly. And because I didn't buy the tools, I figured it would be better for me to just pay the bike shop to do it this one time versus spending like, $60 on the tools for it. Because the tools I was finding, there's 2 pieces, there's 2 parts that you need. One to take off the forks, and then the other one to press the forks, to compress the forks to the column. And I didn't want to buy them this time around, but I will, because I think it's important to have in your shop, especially if you're aspiring to be a bike mechanic such as myself. So I had the shop change over the forks for me, $30 versus $60 for the actual parts. And it was a game changer. The fork was a complete game changer, because there's so much bounce to it when you're riding it. It feels good. It doesn't feel stiff when you're riding. Whether you're going up a curb or off of a curb, it just bounces. It's just the suspension just bounces, and it's beautiful. I love the way that it handles. But on my next build, I plan on using triple tree forks. I've already got the frame that I want to work on next, and I'm going to do another cruiser, a different style than Ghost Cruiser, but I'm going to definitely put in some work on this next cruiser. It's going to be a beautiful build, and I'm going to take everything that I learned from this last build and the first build, and just put out something even better than the first two that I've done so far. So yeah, the forks was definitely an obstacle, but another lesson learned. And then the last challenge was the control box. Now, I had the hardest time figuring out what I was gonna do for the controller, because the bag that came with just straight garbage. Like, I don't even think it's made, for a controller to go inside. It was too tiny. The controller is square, yet the bag that they give you to put it in is a little triangular, and it's like not even a week after it being inside the bag, it started bursting out, because it's a square going into a triangle, and it makes no sense, right? And I wanted to do something special for the controller, and even to house like the battery properly. I wanted to take the full triangle midsection of the bike and enclose it. The problem is that the batteries was too bulky for that. Not something I could have done. Something like the same thing I did with Ghost Cruiser, I could not do with Smoke Racer, especially because of the positioning of the battery. On Ghost Cruiser, I've got the battery mounted to a rear rack, and then wood panniers that I built. But I didn't want to do that same thing with the Racer. I had to figure out something, and the idea was just, once again, to build something. But I didn't want to build with wood. I built with wood with Ghost Cruiser, and it's heavy. Now, I'm not complaining about the weight, because I wanted Ghost Cruiser to be heavy, particularly because I wanted it to make it harder for someone to lift the bike, just to take the bike away. But for the Racer, not so much, right? So yeah, I played around with a few different ideas, and decided I wanted to build with PVC. So after doing extensive research and looking around, I did find PVC boards, and they're not cheap. They're definitely not cheap. But then at this point, they're not as expensive as wood is, because wood has gone out the roof in price since the pandemic. So the PVC, however, I've done 2 builds for this control box. In the first box I built, I did it with 1/4 inch 12 by 12 PVC sheets, and you get 3 in a pack, and for all 3 for the 1/4 inch were $22. Yeah, it's not too bad, right? But like I said, they were 12 by 12, and only got 3 in a pack. So I had to be very particular, very meticulous about cutting and making sure it was right the first time, because then I would have to buy more PVC to make it happen. So the first box, not knowing what to do, or understanding how I could work with PVC, I thought I would be able to just glue it together with hot glue. Big mistake. Maybe liquid nails would have worked a whole lot better, but it was my first time once again. So I put it together, and the box held sturdy for a little while, but the glue falling apart on it, and it being so thin, 1/4 inch thick, it wasn't like I could actually put screws in. I did nail it together, but nah, still fall apart, even with the glue and the nails. So I reordered some PVC, but this time it was 1/2 inch thick, still 12 by 12s, and work with that. The second build much better, much better. Holds very well. Everything, I was able to screw it together. And the box is solid, but something you don't really anticipate is how it will screw together, how everything will come together. And it seems like the parts kind of want to shift once they're screwed together. And I couldn't quite get everything even. Yet, I still put it together. It still looks pretty damn good for a second attempt. The only thing that I would say isn't perfect with the box is, I would say, the way the door is mounted on it. It's fine. Open, shuts, locks perfectly, just not quite aligned perfectly. So I'm also experimenting with epoxy. And I wanted to work with epoxy because I wanted to seal the box on Ghost Cruiser because they're made out of wood. And it's my first time really working with epoxy as well. Epoxy is a very strong glue that you can use for surfacing. So I did use epoxy on Smoke Racer to not necessarily seal the box because it's PVC and it's made for water anyway, but I wanted to definitely epoxy over it so that one thing does happen with the PVC is that when you place things on it or it gets dirty, you get scratched or leave like rubber marks. For example, I mounted my camera mount on there and it has rubber legs and you can see the scuffs on it from that, and it was something that I wanted to alleviate and make it a little bit more of a cleaner surface. And my first time working with epoxy, I wouldn't say it's an epic fail, but I could definitely improve. So all in all, I found this build was fun. It was challenging the way I like it, but it's rewarding. There's nothing like putting your own touch on something, building something, and getting the satisfaction of learning new things. So if you're a builder out there and you're interested in doing your own e-bike or your own bike, don't be afraid to experiment with materials. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself with different things if you've never done before. May not come out perfect the first time, but if you continue at it, you continue, tweaking it and remodeling it, whatever it is that you have to do to get it to your liking, the reward in the end is the best feeling. Because I built another e-bike and it may not be the most perfect build to me, but it still turns heads, and I still get a ton of questions from people who find the bike fascinating, who find the style fascinating and compliment it. So don't shy away from a challenge. That's all. Embrace it. Walk right into it and do your best at it. You never know. Like I said, it may not be perfect to you, but it can be a beautiful piece of art or a beautiful piece of work to someone else. If you'd like to be part of our purpose, mission, and our journey, please consider becoming part of the Electron Rebels Bike Club. You can find links to the club in the description below. Ride easy.